All right, we're done with unit 2, but just as a kind of starting thing, all right, so we can start using more trig and stuff as we go through our other units. We're going to slowly work in trig review into the other things that we're learning. So hopefully, all right, this is actually a review. It's things you've seen before, but maybe you've forgotten, or you just need to kind of refresh. All right, so we're going to break it down. In this video, we're just going to look at the values of sine and cosine. But the first thing we need to talk about is the unit circle. Unit circle is just a fancy way of saying I have a circle, and the radius is 1. We talk about the unit circle with angles, so it's important to remember if I go all the way around the circle, that's 360 degrees. But unfortunately in calc, we basically never use degrees. All right, and instead is 2 pi radians. All right, so a full circle is 2 pi radians, which means I break down the circle in half. Pi radians is going to give me halfway around. And this 90-degree angle going straight up is pi over 2. All right, so those are some important kind of markings to help you remember where on the circle you are. 2 pi's all the way around, pi is halfway around, and pi over 2 is basically 90 degrees. All right, we're always going this way around the circle, counterclockwise. I actually just said that the unit circle can be broken down into 4 quadrants. So if we have our unit circle, it's in the middle of the xy plane. And you can see there's kind of 4 different pieces. That's why they're called quadrants for 4. All right, we have quadrant 1 in the top right, 2, 3. And just like the angles, the quadrants go counterclockwise. And again, the kind of cutoff points, this first cutoff is at pi over 2. This one's at pi. This one's at 3 pi over 2. And this one, again, is a full circle at 2 pi. All right, so those are our 4 different quadrants, because knowing what quadrant an angle is in will help us determine some information about it. All right, so when we have an angle, we're going to draw it inside the unit circle. So I'm going to kind of draw a small picture here. Now we have our angle. All right, the side of that angle will hit exactly 1 point on the unit circle. We don't care about this initial one here. That's always just the positive x-axis. But the actual important part of the angle will always hit the unit circle in exactly one place, and that every single point has an x and a y value. And whatever this x value is, we call the cosine of the angle. And a lot of times for angles, we use this theta. All right, is whatever that x value is, and the sine value, similar, is whatever the y value is. So one thing that confuses a lot of students is the parentheses. They think it's like multiplication or something, but cosine and sine are functions. So this angle theta, all right, gives me an angle in my unit circle, and that goes into the cosine function. And the cosine function gives me out this x value. Same thing for sine. I care about an angle. I put it into the sine function, and I get out whatever that y value is from that point. All right, so sine and cosine are functions. So when you see that thing in parentheses, you're not multiplying or anything like that. It's going into the sine function and then giving me some output. So there are some values we have to just straight up memorize to help us with these values of sine and cosine, but there is a pattern to them, as well as some like intuition you can use to help you list off the values. So the important values are all going to be in the first quadrant, so in this kind of top right part. And there's kind of the 2 starting angles. All right, the very small angle 0. All right, you haven't gone anywhere, and the 90-degree angle pi over 2. And then we can break it down into 3 places in the middle. So we have our 30-degree angle, which is pi over 6. Our 45-degree angle, which is pi over 4. And 60 is pi over 3. All right, so you can see the denominator gets smaller while the angle gets bigger. All right, there's a couple starting points. All right, so the starting point there, you've gone to the right directly, and again, it's a unit circle, so you've gone to the right 1, which means your x value is going to be 1, and your y value is going to be 0. All right, so that gives me my sine and cosine. Going straight up at pi over 2, now I've gone straight up, so my y value is 1, and my x value, my cosine, is 0. And once you get those filled in, sine is going to go from 0 up to 1, so it's going to keep getting bigger. Cosine is going to go from 1 down to 0. All right, here's the little pattern that can also help you. So I can rewrite these like this. And it doesn't seem like it's gonna make much sense to start why I'm doing this, but there is a pattern. So if I rewrite 0 and 1, 0 as the square root of 0 over 2, and 1 as the square root of 4 over 2, then what I'm gonna do is just change this square root by 1 each time. So the square root of 0 over 2 is gonna become the square root of 1 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, square root of 3 over 2, and ends at the square root of 4 over 2. For cosine, I'm gonna go in reverse. Go 3, 2, 1. And this is gonna give me my values, only knowing that there's one extra one that simplifies. The square root of 1 over 2 is just 1/2. All right, so this is kind of the starting point. All right, if you can make this chart any way with a picture or this, using the square roots or not using square roots, all right, this is like the minimum you have to have memorized in order to do all the other values for your trig function. So if you don't have this memorized, you're kind of stuck. You can't really do anything except for kind of guess. All right, but this is the starting point. If you can list off these values for sine and cosine and these 5 angles, you can do everything else. All right, all the other quadrants are going to give us those types of values. There's square root of 1 over 2 and square root of 2 over 2 and that type of stuff, which is positive or negative signs. So if we think about our quadrants, all right, cosine are x values, and x values are positive to the right. And then our cosine values are going to be negative going to the left. All right, so just from knowing that, I know what quadrant my angle is in. I know if it's going to be positive or negative for cosine. And then sine is going to be similar. Sine is positive, is y value, so it's going to be positive going up. And since sine is y values, it's going to be negative going down. So just by knowing what quadrant I'm in, I'm going to know whether my values are positive or negative, all right, depending on if it's cosine or sine. All right, so how would I do cosine of 2 pi over 3? All right, so one thing to recognize is when you fully simplify your fractions, is over 3 is important because that's going to be related to just our pi over 3 angle. And we know cosine of pi over 3, or if we go back to that chart a couple of slides ago, cosine of pi over 3 was 1/2. So now we just need to figure out, we know the value is going to be 1/2, and now we have to figure out, is it going to be positive or is it going to be negative? All right, and to do that, we just need to figure out what quadrant we're in. So 2 pi over 3, what quadrant is going to be in? So the way I like to do it is I think about pi and 2 pi. All right, because that's my kind of cutoff for the half circle and my cutoff for a full circle. And what I'm going to do is rewrite these using the same denominator as my angle. So pi is 3 pi over 3, and 2 pi is 6 pi over 3. And now I see, well, 2 pi over 3, 2 is a little less than 3. So if I think about my unit circle, pi is the half circle. I've gone a little bit less than the half circle, so if I'm a little bit less than the half circle, I haven't made it all the way around to here yet. I'm somewhere there. All right, so that's how I know that this angle is going to be in quadrant 2. And in quadrant 2, cosine is negative. All right, so I can get rid of the positive, and I know my final answer is negative. All right, so negative 1/2 is my final answer. And you can do this for every angle, just relate it to the half circle pi, the full circle 2 pi, and figure out, all right, are you a little less than the half circle, a little more than the half circle, a little less than a full circle, or you're in quadrant 1, which are kind of the nice values. All right, so that's how you can figure out these exact values for these trig functions. All right, same thing, 11 pi over 6. So pi is 6 pi over 6, is just going to be the same number over itself. 2 pi is double that number, so it's 12 pi over 6. Right. And again, 11 is slightly less than 12, so if I think about my unit circle, all right, I haven't made it all the way around the 2 pi yet, so I'm a little bit short of a full circle, which puts me in quadrant 4. In quadrant 4, sine is negative because I'm going down and I'm talking about y values. And then sine of pi over 6 is 1/2. All right, so putting those two things together gets me my sine value. All right, so this is a real quick review of how to figure out the values of sine and cosine. This is really the starting point of all the trig. And from here, we'll talk about some identities or other trig functions and that type of thing, kind of work it in as we go throughout the year. So by the time we get to the spring, I've had a full review of trigonometry.